Number 6, the happy timeline. Okay, so let's talk about Ekko's story in this alternate timeline. God, talking about alternate timelines makes my brain bleed. So Ekko is sent to a version of Piltover where Hextech was never invented. The diverging point in this universe is that Vi died in the explosion at Jace's apartment, the same one we see at the beginning of the show. It's never explained, but I assume that Jace also died in the explosion, or was arrested for having magical crystals that result in the death of a child. In any case, without Hextech, Piltover never gained the upper hand in technology, so I assume the economic disparity between them and Zhan was somehow erased. I guess this causes everything in this reality to go perfectly. Everyone is happy, the people are united, and all the old beefs seem to be squashed. So if you're like me, you're probably wondering about a few things. And when I say wondering, I mean scratching your head about how blatantly stupid and disrespectful all of this is. Even though we are about 5 seconds into discussing this plotline, let's break down how this destroys all of the world building set up in the first season. Number 1, killing off your two main heroes. Okay, so you think that if the greatest heroes of your story disappeared, then the world would be worse off for it. But in Arcane, Piltover only seems to benefit from killing off the two main protagonists. Imagine, for example, if Star Wars did the same kind of alternate timeline idea, and it was Han Solo who went into a reality where Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia died in childbirth. Do you think that the galaxy would somehow be in harmony because of this? Do you think that the Empire and Rebels would somehow be friendly and at peace with each other? No. Without Luke and Leia, the Empire would have continued its domination over the galaxy because there wouldn't be anyone there to really stop them. Without Luke, the Death Star wouldn't have been destroyed and Darth Vader would have never killed the Emperor. And without Leia, we would never have seen a young Carrie Fisher in a sci-fi bikini. The point being that they're the biggest force for good in the story, so without them, their universe is doomed to be taken over by evil. When Arcane shows that Piltover is by default better off without Vi and Jace, it tells the audience that these characters are not only useless as main protagonists, but that they are also essentially the bad guys in the story, as they are the cause for all the world's problems. Now I know that Star Wars is more black and white in terms of morality than a show like Arcane. However, it stands to point out that Jace and Vi are good people that try to make Piltover a better place. So what is the show trying to say about its main protagonists? What is the message about trying to do the right thing? Number 2, invention bad. So the second statement the alternate timeline is making is that Hextech is the cause for Piltover and Zahn's Great Division. This makes an objective stance on Piltover's status due to its technological advancements, which essentially destroys the whole point of Season 1. In the first season, we are never given an answer as to who's right or wrong in the conflict between Zhan and Piltover. The writers knew enough to trust the audience to make up their own minds and managed to keep both sides morally gray. We see the good and bad in both Zhan and Piltover. Each side has its heroes and villains. This all gave an interesting and more complex take on the situation, giving justifications to support both sides of the conflict. Now, though, we understand that it's essentially Jace's inventions that ruin everything. Everyone could have been best buddies if he wasn't around to screw things up. So I guess all of these interesting debates between Heimerdinger and Jace about ambition and innovation versus caution and hubris is null and void now. Heimerdinger was right. Jace was stupid for trying to invent new things. Invention and progress is bad. The debate has been solved.
Oh, that's real nice.
This plotline also ignores the fundamental class struggle between these two sides. The conflict between Zhan and Piltover was not rooted in Hextech. Removing this invention would not simply fix all the problems between these two sides, as the conflict was much larger than any one issue. There had been years of disdain that underlined much of the city's historical problems. We see this in the interaction between Vander and Savika.
We should hit them back. We've got the numbers to beat them.
Yeah, let's teach them what it means to mess with us!
Revenge was a strong motivator for many of the people in the Undercity, and that's why they ultimately turned to Silco. So laying the blame of this great class struggle on Jace and his inventions reveals the fundamental lack of understanding of the greater story here. Number 3, Zhan and Shimmer. So the idea that Hextech being confirmed as Piltover's greatest problem not only spits in the face of the interesting perspectives of the characters, but it also blatantly disregards the counterpoint, which is Shimmer. In the first act of the first season, we see that while Jace is working on creating inventions powered by the arcane magic, Silco and Dr. Revok are also working on chemical technologies as a way for Zhan to get an edge over the Topsiders. They both got their start around the same time, and both technologies embody their creators. While Hextech is clean and fancy looking, Shimmer is more unstable and twisted, giving its users a more monstrous and powerful form. The downside of Shimmer is that it's super addictive, and this creates a huge problem for both sides of the city. We see this in the slums when Vi and Caitlin are hiding from Silco. It seems like the writers completely forgot about this issue when creating this utopian version of Piltover in the alternate timeline. Silco had already begun mass production of Shimmer before Hextech had even been invented. So without Hextech to stop him, then Silco would have had a serious advantage over the Topsiders. Which is what he wanted in the first place. The idea that Silco of all people would not go through with his plans when he had a leg up on his enemies is ridiculous. He is a character that would have done anything for Zhan and would certainly take advantage of this situation.
And I was left with an understanding. The only way to defeat a superior enemy is to stop at nothing, to become what they fear. Greatest thing we can do in life is find the power to forgive.
Yeah.
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 The fact that this is never addressed shows that the writers completely lack any understanding of the greater technological conflict between these two sides. This whole episode is such a clear and obvious fan service that it's become painful to watch. Like so much of this season, every scene is supposed to blind the audience with this bland emotion that is never earned. The writers are banking on the fact that the audience will love this dancing scene, or this happy ending, or this reunion, because we love these characters in Season 1. However, the writers of Season 2 couldn't make these characters interesting themselves, so they just throw some easy emotional bait for the audience, hoping we would fall for it. Hey, you're being had. It's a fucking scam, don't buy into it. No, stop. There is no meaning here. It's empty, heartless crap. Number 7. The Lost Yordle. While on the topic of Episode 7 and all its bullshit, let's add to the list of things that the writers forgot about or completely mismanaged. Yes, and I am talking about you, my dear Heimerdinger. Like Ekko, Heimerdinger is sent to this alternate timeline. However, for some reason, he arrives a little over 3 years earlier. And no, this isn't explained, so don't bother asking.
Forget about it. Forget about it.
Okay, so now let the questions begin. So Heimerdinger has been here for 3 years, and in this time he has done what?
Please tell me you figured out a way to get us home.
Ah yes, he's made a fucking guitar, and has become a cheap knockoff of Bob Dylan.
And if you love the journey more than the end.
Some people are saying that your new music sounds a lot like Bob Dylan.
Well, maybe Bob Dylan sounds a lot like me.
So this is also never explained, but let's try to make an educated guess as to what this all actually means. Heimerdinger, the leader and founder of Piltover, wakes up in the body of his alternate self. Since everything has played out without Hextech's existence, it is natural to assume that this version of Heimerdinger is still leading the council, as he would never have been voted out by Jace. So what does Heimerdinger do in this situation? Does he try to warn people that he's not from this timeline? That he has actually usurped the body of his alternate self? Surely that would be the right thing to do. I mean, he has stolen the life of another person. They may share the same name and body, but they have had completely different experiences. They are in fact completely separate beings. So you'd think it would be Heimerdinger's top priority to return to his timeline as quickly as possible so he could give his alternate self his life back. If not for that reason alone, then saving his own reality should be enough motivation not to waste any time here. I mean, Heimerdinger has his own existence and his own timeline to worry about. He has friends and a city that he built, so surely that would be some level of importance to him. What about the tree? That was like the whole reason for them being here in the first place, right? They had to save this big tree from dying? Oh, they forgot about the tree, didn't they? By this interaction, it seems that he has in fact made no effort to try to leave, nor does he really seem to care either. He's just accepted living in this timeline, despite this attitude not only being completely out of character, but also extremely reprehensible on every moral level.
Weird.
So not only does he ignore any chance of getting out of this situation, he also seems to do everything he can to ruin the life of his alternate self. I mean, he builds a guitar and becomes a street urchin. He has quite literally thrown away all of his political and scientific achievements just to wait around for Ekko to maybe appear? And for what? As the leader of Piltover, Heimerdinger would have had access to countless resources and people that could have helped him get home. I mean, he has a fairly good grasp on the science of hex tech and the Arcane, which he could have used to create some time machine on his own. I mean, we literally see him accomplish this on his own in one evening while Ekko is out dancing with Powder. Surely if he had had the power of Piltover's scientific community at his disposal, he could have achieved in creating this device a lot sooner. But no, he just waits around for Ekko to show up, and as soon as he does, Heimerdinger tells him that they're both fucked, but there's nothing to worry about because everything's great here. I mean, it takes Ekko all of 5 minutes to start collecting the hex crystal fragments on his own from the explosion at Jace's apartment. An event that Heimerdinger was equally aware of, as he was also on the council at the time of the explosion. Fuck, he even had a whole trial for Jace after it happened. Surely in the 3 years he's been here, it might have occurred to Heimerdinger to go check out the place at least. He again would have had the time and the resources to investigate what had happened to Jace in this reality, as well as the hex crystals. But you see, this is not Heimerdinger. And no, I don't mean this is Heimerdinger from an alternate timeline. I mean, this is not the same character from Season 1. This is the Diet Heimerdinger. The neutered, watered-down asshole version that makes no major choices except when he decides to vaporize himself at the end of the episode. Season 2 begins after a terrorist attack that kills a large portion of Piltover's ruling government. These were people that Heimerdinger had known for years. People that he ruled the city with. The city he helped create. Yet we never see his reaction to an event that would deeply affect him. He never mentions the council attack or mourns the loss of his former colleagues. Instead, we get him making fucking bubbles and sneaking around the vents like he's a character out of a Looney Tunes episode. And despite constantly referring to Ekko as his pupil, Heimerdinger instead teaches him nothing and completely relies on him to push the plot forward. His entire arc through Season 1 of being outed by the council only to end up in Zhan to finally see the side of the city he had neglected was a really interesting direction for the character. But as we have seen before, the writers wanted to avoid the Zhan and Piltover conflict, so they had to immediately undo this decision and instead send Heimerdinger to another reality altogether.
Right, yeah, of course.
So anyway, after Ekko decides to do the moral thing and look for a way back to their reality, he actually has to convince Heimerdinger to help him. Jesus Christ, why did they decide to turn this guy into a complete asshole? Man, your world is dying. What the fuck are you talking about? So after yet another montage, Ekko, Powder, and Heimerdinger create a device that can get them back to their timeline by using Jace's acceleration rune. I mean, I think that's what it is. I don't fucking care. So despite their desperate urgency to get back to their own reality, Ekko goes off on a cute date with Powder. Meanwhile, Heimerdinger discovers time travel. And of course, Ekko shows up just in time to get into the machine. Heimerdinger, I guess, has to stay behind to operate the machine and send Ekko back. And because he forgot to plug in a socket, he dies. Ironically, we can also assume that they will never address that both he and his alternate self may have died here. But you know what? Who cares?
What about the reality where Hitler cured cancer, Morty? The answer is don't think about it.
I'm glad he's dead because every second spent on this deep-fried abortion of a season is a travesty. Not one character could escape this absolute tidal wave of horrible writing, and Heimerdinger is no exception. Heimerdinger had an interesting historical perspective that guided the course of the story. But in Season 2, he was reduced to a bad punchline in a series of jokes that are about as funny as an Amy Schumer special. Good riddance. Continued in Part 6.